Commander Lee Hanna pressed her face against the cold metal wall of the damaged ship. The bridge lights flickered on and off like dying stars. 3 months ago, she commanded over 200 warships. Now only 30 broken vessels remained, hiding like scared children in the cold asteroid field. The war was supposed to be different. Humans were meant to explore the galaxy, make friends with alien races, and build a better future together. Instead, they found the hegemony waiting for them. The alien alliance didn't want friends. They wanted slaves. Lieutenant Park Minho looked up from his station. His hands shook as he adjusted the communication equipment. "Commander, the message is coming through again. Should I put it on the main screen?" Hanna nodded. She had watched this recording 50 times, but each viewing felt like a knife twisting in her chest. The holographic display came alive, showing 12 different star systems scattered across the galaxy. Each one held a prison camp full of human civilians. The alien commander in the recording was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin like black metal. His voice sounded like grinding gears when he spoke. "People of Earth, you will witness the price of resistance. In 72 hours, every human prisoner in these 12 facilities will be executed. This is what happens to species who dare challenge the natural order." The recording ended. The bridge fell silent except for the steady beep of life support systems working overtime to keep them alive. Captain Kim Ji-won appeared on the communication screen from his ship. His cruiser had taken heavy damage in the last battle. Half his crew was dead, and the other half was barely holding together. "Hanna, we need to talk. All the captains are requesting an emergency meeting." Within an hour, 12 surviving ship captains gathered in the conference room. Their faces told the story of their defeat. Burns, scars, and exhaustion marked every person present. These were the lucky ones who had survived when so many others hadn't. "Let's be honest about our situation," Captain Baek So-min said, her voice steady despite the bandages covering half her face. "We have 30 ships against their thousands. Most of our weapons are damaged. Our shields barely work. We can't save those prisoners. So we just abandon them?" Captain Oh Min-seo slammed her fist on the table. "Those are our people up there. Farmers, teachers, children who never asked to be part of this war. Being realistic isn't abandoning them," Kim Ji-won replied. "It's accepting that some battles can't be won. If we attack, we'll lose our remaining ships and accomplish nothing." Hanna listened to the argument that had been going on for hours. Every captain made valid points. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Military logic said retreat was the only smart choice, but military logic didn't account for the human heart. "I've been thinking about my daughter," Hanna said quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone knew her family had been captured during the first wave of attacks. "She's probably in one of those camps. Maybe she's scared. Maybe she thinks we've forgotten about her." She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the asteroid field. Small chunks of rock drifted past like frozen tears in space. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me stories about our ancestors. They sailed across dangerous oceans not because it was safe, but because they believed in something bigger than themselves." "Commander, with respect, this isn't about belief," Captain Yoon Tai-ho interrupted. "This is about mathematics. 30 ships versus thousands equals death." "Maybe," Hanna agreed. "But what happens to humanity if we survive by abandoning our principles? What's the point of winning a war if we lose our souls?" The debate continued, but Hanna's mind was elsewhere. Her chief engineer, Choi Seo-jun, had been working on something in secret. He claimed it was just routine maintenance, but she had noticed the strange energy readings coming from the lower decks. After the meeting ended with no resolution, Hanna made her way to the engineering section. She found Seo-jun hunched over a complex array of glowing crystals and twisted metal. His workstation looked like organized chaos. "What are you building down here?" she asked. Seo-jun jumped, nearly dropping a delicate component. "Commander, I didn't hear you come in." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "I've been working on the jump drive systems. I think I found a way to make them work differently." "Different how?" "Well, normal jump drives move ships through space gradually." "What?" I'm proposing would move them instantly across vast distances. We could hit all 12 prison camps simultaneously. Hana felt her heart skip. Is it possible? Maybe. The technology is completely untested. It might work perfectly, or it might tear our ships apart at the atomic level. There's no way to know without trying. The weight of decision pressed down on her shoulders. She could order a retreat and save 30 ships or gamble everything on an impossible plan that might save millions of innocent people. Through the small window, she could see stars scattered across the darkness like distant hopes. Somewhere out there, human prisoners waited for rescue that might never come. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. The modified jump drives hummed with dangerous energy as Commander Lee Hana gave the final order. All ships, prepare for simultaneous. Jump in 10 seconds. Her voice remained calm even though her hands were shaking. This was either humanity's greatest rescue mission or their final mistake. Engineer Choi Seojun watched his instruments with growing alarm. Commander, the energy readings are off the charts. The crystals are overheating faster than expected. Sparks flew from his control panel as the experimental technology pushed their ship beyond its limits. Can we hold together long enough? Hana asked. I honestly don't know. We're in uncharted territory here. The countdown reached 0. Reality twisted around them like a broken mirror. For a moment that felt like forever, the ship existed in 12 places at once. Then the universe snapped back into focus, and they found themselves in orbit around Tartarus Prime, one of the most heavily guarded prison worlds in hegemony space. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Half the bridge consoles had exploded in showers of sparks. Lieutenant Park Min-ho wiped blood from a cut on his forehead as he tried to restore communications. Commander, I'm reading 11 other human ships across the galaxy. The jump worked, but barely. On the surface of Tartarus Prime, Marine Colonel Yoon Tae-ho felt the ground shake as his transport ship materialized in the atmosphere above. The prison facility stretched out before him like a metal cancer on the planet's surface. Thousands of human prisoners were trapped inside those walls. Sergeant Nam Jisoo, status report. He barked into his radio as his Marines prepared for the assault. Sir, the prison has heavy defenses, but they weren't expecting us to appear out of nowhere. We caught them completely off guard. Her voice crackled with static. However, our ship is falling apart up there. We have maybe 20 minutes before it breaks up completely. Taiho looked at his soldiers. These weren't professional warriors. Most had been farmers, mechanics, and shopkeepers before the war started, but they had volunteered for this suicide mission because they understood what was at stake. 20 minutes to save 3,000 people, he said. Let's make it count. The prison assault began with controlled explosions that blew holes in the outer walls. Hegemony guards rushed to respond, but they were confused and disorganized. Their battle plans had never accounted for humans appearing instantly across multiple star systems. Inside the prison, Taeho's team moved through corridors filled with smoke and debris. The first cell block contained human civilians who had been captured during mining operations. Men, women, and children looked up with hollow eyes that suddenly filled with hope. We're getting you out of here, Taeho told them. Stay close and move fast. But as they reached the second cell block, they found something unexpected. Alongside human prisoners were members of other species, Altarian refugees who had opposed the hegemony, Zephyrian scientists who had refused to develop weapons, even some low-ranking hegemony soldiers who had been imprisoned for showing mercy to civilians. Sir, what are your orders? Sergeant Jisoo asked. We only have transport capacity for the human prisoners. Taeho looked at the alien faces staring back at him. Some were children, no different from human children except for the color of their skin or the shape of their eyes. The mission parameters were clear. Save the humans. Leave everyone else. We save them all, he decided. Figure out how to make room. Meanwhile, above the planet, Captain Baek Soman watched her ship tear itself apart. The experimental jump drive had created microscopic tears in the hull that were spreading like cracks in glass. Engineering, how long do we have? Maybe 10 minutes before catastrophic hull failure, came the reply. Then we have 10 minutes to get everyone off that planet. In the Kepler system, Captain Oh Min-seo faced a similar crisis aboard her cruiser. The jump drive had worked, but at a terrible cost. Half her crew was dead from radiation poisoning, and the other half was working frantically to keep the ship together long enough to complete the rescue. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the surface," her communication officer reported. "Colonel Park Jae-won says they've secured the prison, but they found something unexpected." The prison on Kepler held not just humans, but also the largest collection of historical artifacts from dozens of extinct civilizations. The hegemony had been destroying the cultural heritage of conquered species, erasing their history to prevent future rebellion. "Those artifacts represent the memory of entire worlds." Park Jae-won's voice crackled through the speakers. "If we don't save them now, they'll be lost forever." Min-seo looked at her failing ship. They had room for people or artifacts, but not both. The smart choice was obvious. Save the people and let the history burn, but humanity had never been known for making the smart choice. Across 12 star systems, human commanders faced similar decisions. Save only their own people or risk everything to protect strangers. Choose survival or choose principle. Take the easy path or the right path. In every case, they chose the harder option. The hegemony had expected humans to be predictable. Military doctrine said species fought for territory, resources, and genetic survival. But as reports flooded in from 12 different battlefields, hegemony commanders realized they were dealing with something they didn't understand. Humans were dying to save their enemies' children. They were sacrificing strategic advantages to preserve alien cultural artifacts. They were choosing principle over survival at every turn. For the first time in the war, the hegemony felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Not fear of human weapons or tactics, but fear of human ideals spreading to their own people. Revolution, they realized, was more dangerous than any weapon humanity could build. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within hours of the rescue missions, communication networks buzzed with impossible stories. Humans had appeared out of nowhere, saved millions of prisoners, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. But the most shocking part wasn't the military achievement. It was what the humans had chosen to save. On Alteria Prime, Chancellor, Veltar sat in his crystalline office reviewing footage from the prison raids. His 4 eyes focused on a particular scene where human Marines were dying to evacuate Altarian children they had never met. The soldiers could have escaped safely, but they stayed behind to carry wounded alien civilians to the transport ships. "This changes everything," he whispered to his aide. "The hegemony told us humans were savage beasts who cared only for themselves. Perhaps the hegemony was wrong about many things, Chancellor." That night, Veltar made a decision that would reshape the war. He began secretly transmitting hegemony military positions to human resistance cells. It started small, just patrol routes and supply schedules. But as more reports came in of human selflessness, the intelligence sharing grew bolder. Meanwhile, Commander Lee Hana's battered fleet limped through space toward their hidden base in the Horsehead Nebula. The rescue missions had cost them dearly. 12 ships were completely destroyed, and the remaining 18 were barely holding together. Yet morale was higher than it had been in months. "Commander, we're receiving strange readings from the nebula," Lieutenant Park Min-ho reported. "There's something massive hiding in there, something that wasn't there when we left." As they entered the colorful gas clouds of the nebula, their sensors revealed an impossible sight. A space station the size of a small moon hung suspended in the cosmic dust. Its design was unlike anything in known records. Organic curves blended with crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "This is the human fleet," Hana transmitted on all frequencies. "Please identify yourself." The response came not through their communication systems, but directly into their minds. Every human on every ship heard the same gentle voice speaking inside their thoughts. "Welcome, children of Earth. We are the forgotten. We have been watching your progress with great interest." Captain Kim Ji-won's voice crackled over the radio from his damaged cruiser. "Commander, are you hearing this too, or have we all lost our minds?" Before Hana could respond, space around their ships shimmered like water. Beings of pure light materialized on their bridges. They looked almost human but seemed to be made of living starlight. Their faces showed wisdom accumulated over millions of years. "Do not be afraid," the being on Hana's bridge said, its voice now speaking normally. "We are the first species to achieve true consciousness in this galaxy. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons. Most disappoint us. Some surprise us. Very few inspire us." Engineer Choi Seojun stared at the being with scientific fascination. "You're the forgotten. The legends say your people transcended physical existence millions of years ago." "Legends often contain truth wrapped in poetry," the being replied. "We chose to step back from galactic affairs because we grew tired of watching species repeat the same patterns. Conquest, empire, collapse. The cycle seemed endless." "Then why reveal yourselves now?" Hana asked. The being's expression grew thoughtful. "Because in 12 star systems we watched your people choose a different path. You risked everything not for conquest or revenge, but to save strangers, even enemies. This is new in our experience." The Forgotten explained that they had been testing various species for millennia, looking for one that might break the cycle of violence and oppression. They offered advanced technology, but with a condition. "We will share our knowledge, but first you must prove that power will not corrupt you as it has corrupted so many others. You must show us that humanity deserves the tools to reshape this galaxy." Lieutenant Kang Dong-yun from the Science Division studied the holographic displays the Forgotten shared. The technology was beyond human understanding. Energy weapons that could crack planets, shields that could protect entire star systems, construction techniques that could build new worlds from cosmic dust. "This could end the war in days," he whispered to Hana. "That's exactly what we're afraid of," the being replied, having heard his thoughts. "Easy victory often creates easy tyrants. Your species interests us precisely because you choose the difficult path when easier options exist." The test began. Immediately, the Forgotten provided coordinates to the Hegemony's Central Command Station, the massive fortress where their Supreme Council made all military decisions. They also provided the means to destroy it utterly. One shot from their advanced weapons would end the war instantly, but there was a catch that made Hana's heart sink. The command station was surrounded by the largest refugee camp in the galaxy. Millions of civilians from dozens of species lived in orbital habitats around the fortress. They were there because the hegemony had displaced them from their homeworlds, turning them into living shields for their military headquarters. "You could destroy the command station and end this war today," the being said, "but doing so would kill millions of innocent people, or you could find another way, though it will be far more dangerous and might fail completely." Captain Bayek Somin's voice came through the communication system. "Commander, I'm seeing the tactical readouts. This is an impossible choice." But as Hana studied the data, she realized it wasn't really a choice at all. The Forgotten weren't just testing human military capability. They were testing human character. Would humanity become the very thing they were fighting against if it meant easy victory? Around the fleet, other captains reached the same conclusion. The hard path was the only path that led to a future worth living in. "We'll find another way," Hana announced. "We didn't come this far to become monsters at the finish line." The being on her bridge smiled, an expression that seemed to light up the entire room. "That, Commander, is exactly what we hoped you would say." The real test was just beginning. The Hegemony command station floated in space like a metal mountain surrounded by thousands of smaller habitats. Each habitat housed refugees from worlds the Hegemony had conquered. Men, women, and children from dozens of species lived in cramped conditions, unknowingly serving as human shields for their oppressors. Captain Oh Min-seo piloted her stealth fighter through the maze of civilian ships. Her hands gripped the controls tightly as she navigated between cargo vessels filled with families and transport ships carrying the elderly and sick. One wrong move would mean collision, and collision would mean death for hundreds of innocent people. "This is insane," her wingman Lieutenant Han Jun whispered through the communication channel. "We could just target the command station directly. One shot and the war ends." And we become exactly what they say we are, Minseo replied, guiding her fighter past a hospital ship marked with alien medical symbols. Mass murderers who hide behind military necessity. The plan was more complex than anything humans had attempted before. Instead of destroying the command station, they would infiltrate it while simultaneously evacuating every civilian habitat in the area. It would take perfect coordination between ground forces, pilots, and evacuation ships. One mistake would doom millions. Commander Lee Hana watched the operation unfold from the bridge of her flagship. Holographic displays showed human ships scattered throughout the refugee zone, each one working frantically to load civilians onto transport vessels. The evacuation was proceeding slower than hoped. "Commander, we're getting reports from the surface teams," Lieutenant Park Min-ho announced. "Marine Colonel Yoon Tai-ho has breached the station's outer defenses, but resistance is heavy." Inside the command station, Tai-ho led his Marines through corridors designed to confuse invaders. The hegemony had built their fortress like a three-dimensional maze, with passages that led nowhere and rooms that served no purpose except to slow down attackers. "Sergeant Nam Jisoo, status report," he called out as his team reached another intersection. "Sir, we've secured the communications hub, but the main command center is still heavily defended. Also, we found something you need to see." Jisoo led him to a massive chamber filled with monitoring equipment. Screens covered the walls, showing live feeds from across the galaxy. Tai-ho realized they were looking at a surveillance network that watched every major world in hegemony space. "Colonel, look at this," one of his Marines called out. The soldier was pointing at a screen showing the Altarian homeworld. "They're broadcasting our rescue operations on public channels." Tai-ho stared at the images. Altarian citizens were watching footage of human soldiers dying to save Altarian refugees. The expressions on their faces showed shock, confusion, and something else. Hope. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of worlds. The Zephyrian Collective was watching humans risk everything to preserve Zephyrian cultural artifacts. The crystalline Nexari saw human medics treating wounded Nexari prisoners with the same care they gave their own people. "Sir, we're receiving an urgent transmission from Fleet Command," Jisoo reported. "The Zephyrian fleet has just entered the system. They're not attacking us, they're offering to help with the evacuation." The news sent shockwaves through both the human forces and the hegemony defenders. The Zephyrian Collective had remained neutral throughout the war, claiming that the conflict didn't concern them. Now their entire battle fleet was moving to assist human evacuation efforts. More shocking news followed. The crystalline Nexari had opened their sacred communication networks to help coordinate the rescue operation. These networks were considered holy by their people, never used for military purposes, but they made an exception to help save refugee children. On the command station's bridge, Supreme Commander Thokvar watched his carefully constructed alliance crumble in real time. His four arms gestured frantically at the tactical displays, as aid after aid brought him reports of defection. "The Altarian Republic has withdrawn from our coalition," one aide reported. "They're sending medical ships to assist the humans." "The Torvan Empire is demanding an immediate ceasefire," another added. "They say our use of civilian shields violates their religious principles. Even some of our own member species are questioning orders," a third aide whispered. The Kalani delegation walked out of the War Council. They said they couldn't support killing refugees to protect military assets. Thokvar had spent decades building the hegemony through fear and promises of shared power. Member species joined because they believed cooperation meant survival, but watching humans sacrifice strategic advantages to protect civilians had shattered that narrative. Captain Kim Ji-won coordinated the evacuation of Habitat Cluster 7, home to nearly 50,000 refugees. His damaged cruiser could barely maintain orbit, but he refused to abandon the rescue operation. "Engineering, how long can we hold together?" he asked. "Hull breaches are spreading, Captain. Maybe 30 minutes before we lose structural integrity." Kim looked at the refugee transport still loading families. Children pressed their faces against the windows, watching human ships work desperately to save them. Some were the same species that had been shooting at humans just months ago. "Then we have 30 minutes to get everyone out," he decided. The evacuation became a race against time and physics. Human ships pushed beyond their limits while former enemies worked alongside them. The galaxy watched in amazement as ancient prejudices crumbled in the face of human compassion. But the hardest test was still coming. Deep in the command station, Taiho and his Marines finally reached the main command center. Behind heavily armored doors waited the hegemony's leadership and the controls for every military installation in their empire. Victory was within reach, but it would require one final choice between the easy path and the right path. The command center doors exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Marine Colonel Yun Taiho stepped through the smoke and debris, his weapon raised but not firing. Behind him, his Marines spread out to secure the room, their faces grim but determined. At the center of the massive chamber stood Supreme Commander Thokvar, the architect of humanity's suffering. His forearms hung at his sides in defeat, and his black metallic skin seemed to have lost its shine. Around him, the remaining hegemony leadership cowered behind overturned furniture and broken terminals. "It's over," Taiho announced, his voice echoing in the damaged room. "Your fleet is scattered. Your allies have abandoned you. Surrender now, and no one else has to die." Thokvar's eyes met Taiho's across the wreckage. "You've won your war, human. What happens now? Execution? Public trials? Will you parade us through your streets as trophies?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment that would define not just the end of the war, but the beginning of whatever came next. Taiho felt the weight of every human life lost, every civilian murdered, every world burned by hegemony forces. But he also remembered the refugee children they had just evacuated, the Altarian families hugging human soldiers who had saved them, the Zephyrian fleet commanders working alongside former enemies to coordinate rescue operations. "That's not for me to decide," Taiho replied, "but I can tell you what won't happen. We won't become you." Commander Lee Hana arrived at the command center 20 minutes later. The station was secure, but the real work was just beginning. Outside, the evacuation continued as human and alien ships worked together to relocate millions of refugees to safer worlds. She found Thokvar sitting alone in his former throne room, no longer the terrifying Supreme Commander, but an old being who looked tired and defeated. His forearms rested on his knees as he stared at the floor. "I expected humans to be like us," he said without looking up. "Conquerors who would simply replace one empire with another. Your actions make no sense from a strategic perspective." Hana sat across from him, her weapon holstered. "Maybe that's why we won. You prepared for war against an enemy that thought like you. But we don't think like you." "What do you want from me?" Thokvar asked. "Help," Hana replied simply. "Help us rebuild what you destroyed. Help us create something better than what existed before." The offer shocked him more than any weapon could have. "You would trust your former enemy with reconstruction?" "We'll verify everything, of course. But yes, this galaxy belongs to all of us. We need to figure out how to share it." News of the unconditional surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. But more shocking than the military victory was humanity's response to it. Instead of occupation forces, they sent medical ships to help with reconstruction. Instead of punishment, they offered partnership. The transformation began slowly but gained momentum as former enemies worked side by side. Captain Park Jawan found himself overseeing refugee resettlement on worlds that had been enemy territory. Just weeks before, former hegemony soldiers worked alongside human engineers to rebuild infrastructure. "It's strange," one Altarian engineer told him as they worked to restore power to a damaged city. "My people were taught that humans were violent savages. But you're the first species I've ever met that fights wars to save your enemies." Major Lim Yuna led joint peacekeeping forces composed of humans and former hegemony species. Her soldiers included Zephyrians, Nexari, and even some who had fought against humanity just months before. They patrolled together, ate together, and slowly learned to trust each other. The most difficult conversations happened in the newly established Galactic Assembly. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to draft what would become known as the Terran Accords. The name wasn't chosen to honor human dominance, but to commemorate the human principle that had changed everything. No species should stand alone, became the founding principle of the new galactic government. It was a radical idea that went against millions of years of evolutionary competition and territorial warfare. The Forgotten watched these developments with interest. The beings of light had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but they had never witnessed anything like humanity's approach to victory. They began to emerge from their hidden observatories, offering their ancient knowledge to help build the new order. Engineer Choi Seojin worked with Forgotten technology specialists to develop new methods of faster-than-light travel that didn't tear ships apart. The knowledge they shared would make exploration safer and bring distant worlds closer together. But perhaps the most significant change was in the hearts and minds of ordinary people across the galaxy. Children who had grown up fearing other species began to play together in integrated schools. Scientists who had competed for resources now collaborated on projects that benefited everyone. Commander Hana stood on the observation deck of the new orbital station that served as the assembly's headquarters. Through the transparent walls, she could see ships from dozens of worlds docking together. Former enemies were becoming neighbors, and neighbors were becoming friends. Lieutenant Park Min-ho joined her at the window. "Do you think it will last? Commander, this peace we've built?" Hana watched a group of mixed-species children playing in the station's recreation area. Human kids chased Altarian youngsters while Zephyrian children laughed at their games. "It will last as long as we remember what we learned during the war, that our strength doesn't come from being stronger than others, but from making others stronger alongside us." The epic journey continued, but now it was a journey they were taking together. The galaxy had learned something new about itself, something that changed everything. Hope wasn't just possible, it was contagious. And in the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the stars.